In this lecture, let's update the player to be an agent. An agent refers to an object that can move around the navigation mesh. By default, Unity does not assume which objects are agents. We must manually assign agents. Currently, we have one object that should be an agent, which is the player. In the Characters directory, open the Player object with Prefab Edit mode. Next, select the Parent object. An object can be updated to be an agent by adding a component. As we discussed before, the parent object should be responsible for the logic of our prefab. Child objects should be responsible for visual information. Therefore, be sure not to apply this component to the wrong object. Click the Add Component button. Search for a component called Nav Mesh Agent. Add it to the object. Next, move the component above the movement component. You can do so by dragging the component by its name. This step is entirely optional. The order of your components does not affect the behavior of the game object. Reordering components is a feature for keeping your object's components organized. I prefer to position Unity components at the top. Custom components should appear at the bottom. It's easier to search for components with this structure. Let's modify the settings of the Navigation Mesh Agent component. Specifically, we're going to alter the speed settings of the agent. There's a section called Steering. Under this section, the speed setting should be set to 3. This setting determines the speed of the agent. The speed is measured in Unity units. The lower the number, the slower the speed. Keep in mind, the size of our tiles is 1 unit. Therefore, the player will be able to move over 3 tiles per second. Feel free to adjust this speed after completing this section. Next, let's adjust the Angular Speed setting. This setting configures the speed of the agent's rotation. Our player shouldn't rotate fast. For this game, let's use 6. Lastly, update the acceleration to 4. This setting configures the player's acceleration once they begin and stop moving. Smooth movement is preferred over abrupt steering. Let's move on to the other settings. If we look at the scene, a green outline has appeared around the player. You may not be able to see it with the scene in the background. I recommend editing the player while the objects are isolated from the scene. It'll be easier to view the outline. This green outline will be invisible to the player. The purpose of this outline is to help Unity detect collisions with other agents or obstacles. As you can see, the outline is larger than the game object. We should adjust this outline to be slightly larger than the player. Notice how I said larger and not exact. If the outline is exact, the agent may overlap with other objects. That wouldn't look good. Creating a larger outline can help with overlapping objects. We can use the settings to adjust the outline. First, let's move the outline under the player. Let's adjust the camera to look below the player. The outline is drawn from the center of the player, which isn't what we want. It should be slightly below the player. We can adjust the base by updating the base offset field. Let's set this option to around 0.3. The numbers don't have to be perfect. As long as you get close enough, you're good to go. Next, there's a section called Obstacle Avoidance. Under this section, we can refine the shape of the outline. Let's set the radius to 0.3. Like I said before, the outline should be larger than the actual size of the object. Preventing objects from getting too close to each other is an important feature to consider. Lastly, set the height to 0.6. After making those changes, the outline looks better. Feel free to adjust the outline as you see fit. For now, these settings will work. Other than these settings, everything can be left as is. Once the script is finished, you'll be able to fine-tune these settings to customize the behavior of our agents. In the next lecture, let's begin finishing the code for moving the player.